Greetings, initiates. Welcome to the first installment of How to Attain Knowledge of Higher Worlds, a title that we, of course, subsumed from Rudolf Steiner. We've been writing about his specific way to attain enlightenment through initiation in his book, Knowledge of Higher Worlds, and so we thought it might be appropriate to name this series after that. But what we're going to be doing here from now until every single one of these podcasts is over is entering the Akasha. Now today's Akasha word is heterochrony. Now this word generally is used in biology to talk about prior stages of development that a species or a phylum would follow, and then how that might even be sped up when things that are learned from the past are then passed to the new generation. This is an amazing concept, because if this is true, then, for instance, the fake theory of the hungry monkey theory, which is that once a certain number of beings learneth something, then it collectively goes to everyone. Whether that's true or not, the point is that with heterochrony, whatever we learned in terms of what's called phylogenetism, or basically the basis of heterochrony is the phrase right here, which is ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. In other words, the development of the individual recapitulates the development of the group, of the whole, of all of humanity. So if that's the case, well, how does that happen? And when do we see it? And recently we wrote an article, which will be out soon for publication, which is called The Great I Am. And it goes through also the stages of development of the ego, the I am of the individual, in relationship to the ego, let's call it, of the whole cosmos, or the I am, the great I am of the cosmos. And so that is what we're working with here. If you just say this one word, heterochrony, and you speak of it in relationship to cosmology, because that's what's up here on this chart, on this whiteboard, which I just love having, because now I can draw a picture of exactly what I would like for you to see, and be able to use a visual stimulation to put it into your mind, and so that I can go over some really, really huge concepts, and by simply putting them up there on the board, I can feel as if I at least pointed you in the right direction. So with this, heterochrony, what it basically means, and it's oftentimes used in not only biology and in chemistry, but particularly biology, but also it's used in geology. Metamorphic rock all goes through stages of heterochrony. So in the end, granite will come out looking like granite, but in prior stages it looked quite different. And the substances that were in it looked quite different. They were even fluid. They flowed together. And now you look at granite and it's as hard as a rock, of course. So what is heterochrony? If you could understand what is on this board right now, you would understand Rudolf Steiner's cosmology in a panoramic view. So what we're talking about here is that different substances can and have and do. They came into existence in the far past. They transformed themselves through different stages called manvantaras and pralayas. In other words, each of these places that you see a dot is a manvantara. It's an incarnation of the planet Earth. And the entire intent of the cosmology of this 7-stage dipping down into matter, from spirit into matter, and then from matter back up into spirit, is to create the human being, which is the 4th stage. So, on the left-hand side here, you see the 9 hierarchy. And on the right-hand side, you see the 9 aspects of the constitution of the human being's nature. Now, they are not a one-on-one correspondence, but the nature of it is that with the 9 hierarchy, you can see in 3 different colors that there's 3 stages of the hierarchy, and down here, the human is the 10th. We are the 10th hierarchy. The hierarchy of thoughtful beings, beings who can think, who can delve into love with freedom. When we can do that, we are in fact participating in this hierarchical chain of angels, archangels, archai, In the Greek, the exousiai, dunamis, kuriotetes, in just English, form, motion, and wisdom. And then the thrones, who we've heard about in the Bible, the throne of God. This is the willpower of the hierarchy of these 9 beings. And the cherubim and the seraphim, everybody knows about them because they're the beings of harmony and love. And then above that, I didn't draw it in, and I certainly should have drawn it in, is the Trinity, or some would say 2 trinities, a male and a female trinity. But the point is, you can imagine it any way that you want. For sure, above because the 9 hierarchies here are divided into 1, 2, 3 ranks. Those 3 ranks are also ruled by the beings of, whether you want to call it the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, or whether you want to call it the Mother, the Daughter, and the Holy Sophia. It doesn't really matter, but if you put the 2 of them together, the unmanifest world and the manifest world, all of a sudden you get the hierarchy. Rudolf Steiner said if you could take all that the 9 hierarchy were doing at one moment, and you could put it into a word that a human being might be able to understand, it would be one of a few words. One of them is suffering, and the other one is mother. So when we talk about these 3 stages, as I mentioned before, the incarnations of the earth, Steiner gives them funny names, I'll talk about it in a minute, but as we're talking about the prior 3 incarnations of what we know as the earth now, the earth has concurrent with it through heterochrony and heterotropy, has with it all that has been laid down in the past by these hierarchies to build up these bodies that we now use and take pretty much for granted. But it is the place where our ego, our I am, can find its home, especially because we have the 3 stages: spirit, human, life, spirit, and spirit, self. That's where the 3 higher egos are. And everyone knows we have a physical body, and then you have a life body that keeps that physical body going, that regenerates your body at night in sleep, and that's the etheric body. And then you have the astral body, which is the body of desires, or the astral light. And then in where the ego comes to birth is here in the soul. And that's why there's an S here. I should have written out soul, consciousness soul, intellectual soul, sentient soul. These 3 aspects are basically connected to the I am. And the ego itself, which births at age 21 in a human being, isn't completed until it goes through these 3 7-year cycles. So not until 42 is the ego truly come into its full manifestation. And then if human beings can evolve and extract from the universal laws that they see in the outside world and can gain the eternal that is found there, and as we know, what isn't eternal in the world? Things like love, mercy, grace, compassion, all these beautiful virtues. Those are the things that go on from life to life. But if we can gain them, then we have higher thinking, feeling, and willing, then we can develop the spirit, self, life, spirit, human. And these are gifts, really, of these beings. So if the human being standing here on the earth has the pride, the hubris to say that they think that they are their own person and that they got here somehow out of their own merit, that is a joke. Your physical, etheric, and astral body, which is right here, physical, etheric, astral body, came down in these 3 stages. And when the human came about, then the ego, or what would be called the composite of these 3, one can call the ego, or the I am, comes to birth at this time. And then the spirit self, life, spirit man are the 3 further incarnations of the earth, which all of this is incredibly detailed in Rudolf Steiner's occult science, and in his books, and in theosophy, and in other places you can find spiritual science, and Jakob Berman, in the alchemists, and the theosophists, and the Rosicrucians, on and on and on and on. It's a compilation of everything, but Rudolf Steiner tends to give the very best condensation and modern interpretation that is applicable for our time. So as we're looking at all of this, we can see that this is a whole new religion here. If If you could understand these hierarchical beings right here, their manifestations, their time periods, what they donated to the human being and when, you would have the most complicated picture of the Christ, because of course the Son here in the Trinity came down through this hierarchy all the way down to the realm of the humans and is now going back up and taking humanity with that being. That's the being of the Christ from the Trinity, which is above the hierarchy. So Heterochrony says the following. It says that to begin with, there was a thing called warmth ether, which was really barely a substance. But during this whole period called Saturn, and you see these names, I should probably explain that at this point. This is the symbol for Saturn, Sun, Moon, Earth, Jupiter, Venus, Vulcan. Now I just put either their planetary sigil or the letter V for Vulcan, or basically indicating that these are the 7 incarnations of the Earth. We are only here at the Earth incarnation. But an initiate should be able, through its donation here, that I have to write this in at this point or you won't understand this. The mineral body gave up the physical body. So at this period, when certain hierarchical beings were donating substance and other hierarchical beings were living as an ego in this substance, we were there too, but what came out of it was a substance called warmth ether. Okay? And later, that created our physical body. So the etheric body is created on the Sun periods. The physical period is created here on Saturn. The etheric body is created on Sun. The astral body is created here on the Moon. And the ego body, or the ego, is created here on the Earth. Now, why did I have to write that in? Because it is simultaneous. See these words? Simultaneous, concurrent, ubiquitous, metamorphosis. And if you remember, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. The human being, when it incarnates on the Earth, is going to have to recapitulate all of these stages, come to its own self-consciousness, and hopefully then start to take over for what the hierarchy did before and is doing right now for us. The hierarchy is running our blood system, our respiratory system, our organs. The hierarchy that works out of the Sun, for instance, also works the 7 major organs. You know, the heart, the liver, the spleen, the lungs, the kidneys. So the 7 major organs relate to the 7 planets. And those 7 planets are ruled by these beings right here, the beings of form, the Elohim. They're planetary spirits. One of them rules the moon also, which rules, of course, procreation and the mind. So here are the donations that created our physical, etheric, astral bodies. And so as you see over here, when we get to the Earth, the human being has the benefit that we have a physical, etheric, astral body, but we don't control our astral body or etheric body. We barely control our physical body. Who does? It would be these beings over here, quite specifically. This 3rd rank of the hierarchy controls our thinking, feeling, and willing, but also these other higher hierarchies control other functions in our body, and the Earth, in the etheric body of the Earth, and in the periodicity of time, all kinds of things, and also with the ethers. So, how did this happen? How could it be that we were warmth beings in an incarnation of the Earth called Saturn so long ago that it's literally beyond human capacity to be able to conceptualize? Well, if it was possible and if it were true, then we would be able to glean that wisdom of the etheric body, the warmth ether. And by the way, there's in this presentation, we're not going to talk about the Akasha ether. We're not going to talk about the life ether. We're going to talk, the higher life ether and chemical ether. We're just going to talk about the 4 major ethers that have to do with this cosmological manifestation. So, the warmth ether was laid down so long ago that in our solar system, all that was there were basically like nodules of warmth. But in that warmth, other higher hierarchical beings not only donated that substance, but other hierarchical beings higher than us experienced their own egohood, their consciousness in that warmth. Now, strangely enough, after the next incarnations of the sun and the moon, as they are called, of the earth, so the earth's incarnation of Saturn, sun, moon, laid down warmth ether, light ether, sound ether, and life ether came only at the end when we were on the earth. So, simultaneously, through heterochrony, we are the embodiment of warmth ether, light ether, sound ether, and life ether, but because they were laid down almost like a sedimentary rock, one layer at a time, we find that it manifested our physical, etheric, astral bodies. So when we're thinking astral body, and we're thinking our body of desires, that's the same exact body that was developed on ancient moon when the animals came into existence. When we're thinking of our ether body, that was the same substance. Simultaneously, right now, our ether body is the same substance that was during the sun incarnation of the earth that actually created the plant kingdom. And we would think, well, but wait a second, that doesn't seem right. Why would going backwards into animal, plant, and mineral get you in contact with higher spiritual beings? That's because their ego, their group soul ego, is on a higher plane. And they donated things, but they also are maintainers, sustainers. So they sustain certain kingdoms. So the kingdoms of the minerals is sustained all the way up to the thrones. The thrones provide the ego for all of the minerals, still to this very day. So if we have to think for ourselves, well, we're walking around in a nice solid earth with rocks and crystals, and silica is everywhere, which is like a rock. Well, that's very nice. But do we ever say thank you to the beings of the thrones who donated it 4 incarnations ago of the earth as warmth substance that they gave of their own being? Literally, sacrifice of their own being. And then later, the Karyotites, these beings of wisdom, sacrificed the light that was on the sun incarnation of the earth, and the beings of motion during the moon period donated the sound ether, which then birthed the animals. So when we look back into this realm, this is the realm of the mothers. 3 mothers. These 3 mothers are so frightening that if we could look into our own astral body, etheric body, or physical body with true consciousness, we would drop over dead, because we could not handle the tens of trillions of actions that happen in your body every second. Those are all donations and maintenance of these beings who have set up a cosmology that gives us the ability to have the hubris and the pride, like Lucifer, to say, oh, we are a God, we are a co-creator, we are equal to God. And matter of fact, I decide right now, here on the earth, as a human being, now that I have a life ether, this magical substance, or at least a shadow of it, I'm going to decide there is no God. That is the ultimate pride, and that is the fall. So when you're looking at this, what they call the bathtub curve, or the bell curve, inverted bell curve, or it's just a way to distribute the data, as you're looking at this is the falling into matter. And so human beings were created way up here by these beings, called the beings of form, the Elohim. But they were held back, their spirits were held back. And that's the spirit called spirit human, life spirit, spirit self. They were actually held back. And so as we reach up with our consciousness soul, the highest aspect of our soul body, having transformed these lower bodies to some degree, we can then contact that part of ourselves that we left up here in this world. So a lot of times the students will say, when this is presented, I've been presenting this in classes on theosophy with in anthroposophical studies and Waldorf education for many, many, many years. And so they always would say, well, what's up here at the top? Why don't you have anything up here in the top? So I put this up here just so that it would put it into perspective. Where we come from before the Saturn incarnation, there was all kinds of things going on. There was another whole cosmos like this that had happened, what was called a zodiac. And then there is substance that is left over. And then that leftover substance then becomes the beginning of this new zodiac. And Manvantaras are also always followed in between with the Pralaya, with a Manvantara of manifestation, unmanifestation, manifestation, unmanifestation, manifestation. It's like the stages of a butterfly that has to go into chaos in the chrysalis, in the cocoon. It goes into total chaos. Everything melts down, is reformed. The same substance is there, but it transforms into something new, something at a higher level, something at a higher octave, as it were. And that's what happens every single time you go from an incarnation of the earth, like from Saturn to Sun, or Sun to Moon, or Moon to Earth. And yes, in the future now, we can talk about this, which is Jupiter, Venus, and Vulcan. A good cosmology that presents the heterochrony of all of the hierarchical beings that would have to be part of this manifestation of this creation should tell you where you're going. If it doesn't, what is the goal? What is the end? What is a human? You put human here. What is that? What is an animal? What is a plant? What is a mineral? If we understand that the mineral, the plant, and the animals are part of the human, that was a perfection process to get to the point where the human could be created as a perfect hieroglyph of the universe, a perfect hieroglyphic monad, a perfect 3D holographic representation of the entire cosmos, then you would understand. It wasn't that they could just all of a sudden create the human being. The human being had to have prior incarnations in these bodies, so that when we finally learned in this earth incarnation to stand upright, to speak, to think, and to have memory, and to understand what it means to accept the solar logos coming down to the earth, then you will get what all of this was about. At that point, you automatically, even in the earth incarnation, you start to build this Jupiter incarnation, the next incarnation, with love. So we are surrounded here by wisdom in the earth incarnation because of the Karyotites, the beings of wisdom who created the plant realm, as well as the thrones and the realm of motion, and then with the human being, the form of the human being created by the Elohim. So much wisdom was poured in to this creation that all we really have to do is sit back and reflect upon who we are and totally understand our own nature. Now, are you going to understand the physical body immediately? No, we don't tell our blood corpuscles to dilate or contract or expand or contract. We don't tell our heart to expand and contract. We don't understand our physical body hardly at all. Do we understand our etheric body, the very rhythms? Do we know the rhythms of the liver? I doubt that you could meet a person that would know the 20-minute rhythms of the liver, how to work with it, and at what time of the day it ends and your liver turns off and goes to sleep. But if you knew that, then it would create health, and that's what's found in the etheric body. Not only rhythms, but also memory, all this incredible wisdom. And if you could tap into the thing that we probably understand because it's the closest to us, the astral body, our body of desires, our intentions, are all that drives us, our motivation. If we could understand that, then you could go from being in Christian terms, from a sinner to a saint. You could go from the path of perdition of the 7 deadly sins to the path of the path of the heavenly virtues. And if you understood through this cosmology, which is not just unique to Rudolf Steiner, he added on to it and made it much more understandable. There's all kinds of other names for this. If, for instance, just let's take one little thing here. We could go into these, but these are the ones that are the clearest. Spirit, self-life, spirit, human. That's also called Manas, Buddhi, and Atman in the Hindu faith. In Buddhism, it's called Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, Dharmakaya. So you can break this down into, the new age people would probably just call this the higher self, but there's actually 3 of them. And then you can break this down into many, many different traditions telling you what these are about and how to contact them, because that's what the process of initiation is. That's what the process of waking up, if you were studying Dzogchen and the Lo Jiang, which we're going to be presenting soon, if you were studying that and you woke up and all of a sudden you realized that in this space that we're describing here, this whole thing that I've described there, imagine the space that holds all that in the cosmos. And then imagine that there's a space that holds that, a space that is beyond space. And then if you imagine the time that it took for all of this to happen, these are huge amounts of time, and that this is a huge amount of time, and that the sun used to be as big as out to the ring of Saturn, and then it was to the ring of Jupiter, and then it was to the ring of Mars, and the planet started to incarnate, but it exploded and created the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, and then Mars was created, and finally the Earth was created. These are the cosmic processes that are the donations of these beings, but they also are the exact processes that create your ninefold nature that you can study. But the important thing is that heterochrony is simultaneity. It is synchronicity. It is the flow. It is the fact that you can understand that on your side of the street, in your house, you're experiencing heaven. But you know for a fact right now that the neighbors across the street are in hell. So this world that we've come into, these realms that are all these interpenetrating, simultaneous, more and more refined realms, oftentimes seen as going up or going down. They don't have to go up or down. They're right here. They're right now. So it explains the dimensions. Now, scientists will tell you there's 11 strands or 11 dimensions or more, or sometimes they'll tell you that you go through a wormhole and you can reach infinite dimensions, or you go into a black hole and you can reach all this stuff, which is all theory. No, the reality is very simple. Very, very simple. We are living in the third dimension, but because we have consciousness and we can see ourselves over a period of time, that's the fourth dimension. So if we can get to the point of being a timeless being, then we can actually get to the point of being a spaceless being. And when that happens, then you can do what Buddha said. You can free yourself from suffering, from old age, illness, death, and you can figure out what causes it, which is your perspective in time and your relationship to space, and you can become free of it. And when you do, that is enlightenment. When you are no longer timeless and spaceless. But time and space technically didn't even occur until right about here at this period, time and space. And time and space will end as we go forward, as we know it. So when you can become a person who understands that there are interpenetrating dimensions that are all related to one another, but are separate and distinct, and that behind those forces, in general, let's look at them as forces for a second, behind those forces there is a system, there's a cosmology, there are universal laws, there are spiritual laws, and but even beyond that are the things that are absolutely eternal, which we don't get, as you could say, on this side of the threshold with the physical, etheric, astral, and the ego coming to birth. We only begin to really get this when we take the eternal concepts, the eternal verities, the virtues, when we take what we have learned from these substances, from these other kingdoms. These kingdoms are also called nirvana, parinirvana, mahaparinirvana. As we understand that, as we understand the mothers, and we move forward, we redeem all of this. All of this is an enchantment. All of this is thought, electricity, and the logos, the word, coming into manifestation, becoming more dense all the time, and then becoming liberated once we ourselves, looking at matter through heterochrony, are able to disenchant the donations of these hierarchies and start to take over the work that they do for us, so that then we can become completely self-conscious, co-creating beings. Okay? Now, some of you might think that this is pantheism, but it's not. You see here, this is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? Well, this is Christ. Christ moves through all of these. Christ came down through all of these, and he manifested all the way down into the human, even into these realms I have here written as elemental 1, 2, and 3, the realms of the mothers. Christ went into those realms, took the beings that were in bosoms Abraham, gave them the opportunity to recognize their higher self as a donation from the Elohim to them, and moved everyone forward. It wasn't until we moved out of the first half of the Earth incarnation, which was the Mars incarnation, into the Mercury incarnation, and the mystery of Golgotha came, that the human got an ego that could actually have self-conscious thought out of freedom, without any compulsion, and without being told what to believe by someone else. And so Christ is the independent ego of each human being that is their own master. And in the past, we had, great beings like Zarathustra and Hermes and Moses and Manu and all these beings, and women also, Ishtar and Inanna and Psyche and all the others, teaching us about this wisdom. But now we need to dip into ourselves to that wisdom, because Christ has come only once in all of human history. It's called the mystery of Golgotha, the most important event. And after that, in the blood of Christ mixed with the earth was redeemed. It no longer was in a realm of entropy, because all of this heterochrony, unfortunately, had led the earth to a point where it was dying. But Christ came right here at this midpoint, and on the cross, through the blood, entering into the earth, redeemed the etheric body of the earth. And now Christ's etheric body is merged with the etheric body of the earth and is re-enlivening the earth. And that is true with every human body. So every single human being has been given this element of this risen ego, this new I am consciousness that gives them the ability for for independent development out of thinking, feeling, and willing into higher thinking, feeling, and willing, what is called imagination, inspiration, intuition. And those are these realms right here, imagination, inspiration, intuition. So once you get a cosmology laid down, and this seems like a lot, but one can go back to this 1,000 times and work on one single element, one tiny element, like what's going to happen in the Jupiter incarnation of the Earth. And how can anyone possibly know that? Because we can see that it recapitulates what happened during the moon incarnation of the Earth. So this green line here shows that these are connected. So the animal was created here in this incarnation of the Earth. And sadly enough, remember, the animal was a perfecting of the human form. We are the paragon of the animal kingdom. We are the crown. We are the perfection of it. The animal kingdom was basically an experiment of an excretion of elements in the astral realm that then had to be controlled by the human being completely. So the whole zodiac is controlled by the human being. So in the future, what happens to the animal realm? They're no longer there in the Jupiter realm. What happens in the Venus realm? The plants are no longer there. What happens in the Vulcan realm? The minerals are no longer there. And the human being is transformed into an angel in the Jupiter realm, into an archangel in the Venus realm, into an archai in the Vulcan realm. And at that point, an archai being, as we can see over here, is a very high being who, in fact, will be maintaining their own zodiac if they have gone through the proper growth and progression. And that was the whole idea. This is creation out of nothingness. In other words, in my opinion, an unmanifest God got together with a manifest goddess and basically created something out of nothing, which was the egos of human beings. And now those egos can then develop into angels, archangels, archai, and move on up the realm of the hierarchical ranks. But this is the basis of the incubation of humanity into a god. Because we are, in the future, to be like unto an angel. And if in our time right now would see an angel, we would probably imagine that we were seeing God because of the light, the warmth, all these four ethers, and the Akashic ether and the redeemed life and chemical ether are all manifested by an angel. And so when we have those capacities in the future, then we will be able also to help those beings who did not evolve at the right speed from the Earth into the Jupiter incarnation. So any one of these things, any one of these can go into literally an astounding amount of details that would take practically a lifetime to study and to explain. But we wanted today, with this whiteboard, to draw this picture of a cosmology, because it's way too complicated when I start saying all of this stuff and reeling it off, and people don't have any picture of it whatsoever and don't understand that, well, it's okay. We may not understand an angel, and therefore we may not understand this whole hierarchical realm, but we can understand that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost permeate this as a Trinity, and that no matter where you look, whether it's the human thinking, feeling, and willing, or when they're spiritualized, imagination, inspiration, intuition, whether it's the three soul realms of sentient soul, intellectual soul, conscious soul, the three spirit realms, the same exact patterns happen in the cosmos as happen in the human being. And so Christ as a solar being coming from the sun to the earth is exactly what we see in our solar system. The sun is the life of our solar system, and the earth is its baby. The only place that human beings are being birthed in our solar system. And so what we are seeing there is the same thing that our soul has as an experience when we talk about the higher nature, the higher self, in contacting the higher components of thinking, feeling, and willing. And you can call them whatever you want. But the point is that it is a solar gift. It is a gift of what would be called the Logos. So the solar Logos coming to the earth is not a mythology. It is a cosmology of philosophy, epistemology, ecclesiastical thought, religious doctrine, spiritual doctrine, and the great news is you don't need a teacher to teach you any of this. Every bit of this is self-evident by simply going in and understanding yourself, looking at yourself, and realizing that you're not the one maintaining those things. Who is? And then getting into a relationship, in a conversation with the beings that actually maintain your existence. And when you do, you're going to find out that they have these same exact characteristics that have been described by ancient clairvoyants, great mystical teachers, people who've had revelations since the beginning of recorded time. And so that's what we want to share with you, is another page from Akasha.